All right, let's talk. They dismissed you, didn't they? Said you were just one person. But let me tell you something from someone who's seen it firsthand. One person is never just one person. Think about every turning point in history. It wasn't armies that started revolutions. It was whispers of discontent, a single spark of defiance. Kingdoms crumbled not always because of invasions, but because one soul refused to bow down. A single match can ignite a whole forest, and a tiny seed can crack a mountain if it's got enough time. Yet they looked at you, at your potential, and sneered. It's just one person. That's their fatal mistake. They think strength is all about numbers, but they forgot that truth doesn't need a popularity contest, and conviction doesn't need a cheering squad. When you stood up, you weren't alone. You carried every injustice you've ever survived, every ancestor echoing in your blood, every silent warrior who never got their chance. Suddenly that just one person sounded like thunder. And get this, the very folks who brushed you off are now acting like they're facing a whole damn army. They're seeing ghosts where there aren't any, hearing echoes in empty rooms. Why? Because in their eyes you stopped being an individual. You became a force, a movement, a gathering storm. They don't even know who they're fighting anymore. You or the thousands who are now finding courage in your truth. If you feel this resonating within you, then listen up. So hold on tight, because we're about to unpack how their biggest underestimation became your greatest revelation. That one aligned soul is never just one. It's already an army. First off, they forgot that a soul in alignment is about multiplication, not just adding one to the list. They counted you as one, but they didn't grasp that when you're truly connected to your purpose, your presence amplifies itself. Alignment isn't about perfection. It's about being so grounded in your truth that everything you touch starts to grow. That's the difference between stumbling through life and walking with divine intention. When you aligned, your voice became more than just words. It became a frequency, a vibration, and frequencies don't travel alone. They spread, they resonate, they ripple across time and space. That's why they underestimated you. They thought it was all about numbers, about movements with massive crowds. But one aligned person isn't a solo act, it's a symphony. It's the echo of lifetimes, the universe throwing its full weight behind a single vessel and whispering, "Here, speak through them." When that happens, the one multiplies into infinity. You stop being just you, you become a force carrying every silent battle you've won, every hidden victory nobody saw, every prayer whispered for you. That's why your presence carries weight even in silence. Have you ever stopped to wonder why their plans kept crumbling? They were aiming at a body, but they were up against an energy that doesn't shrink when attacked. It expands. They struck expecting subtraction, but they triggered multiplication. Alignment gave your suffering meaning, and that meaning echoes. You didn't just get back up. You stood up carrying a whole legion of truths. People can't quite explain why you feel bigger than life. Even when you walk into a room alone, it isn't ego, it isn't arrogance. It's alignment. When you're aligned, you're not a single entity, you're a broadcast, a living amplifier of something far greater. And that's why the words, "just one person," don't fit you anymore. They missed the whole point. You became the living example of what happens when a soul aligns fully with divine will. You turned one life into a multiplying force, and that's why you rose as an entire legion. Let that sink in for a minute. If this is striking a chord, then keep listening. Number 2, their whole way of measuring power was flawed from the start. They measured it the way the world teaches, by numbers, followers, influence, by who can gather the biggest crowd. They thought with the right judges, institutions, and majority victory was guaranteed. But true power isn't about how many stand behind you. It's about what stands within you. Conviction. That's the one thing they never saw coming. Conviction doesn't need applause, doesn't need a stage, doesn't need reinforcement. Real conviction becomes an unstoppable current. It carries you when every door slams shut, lifts you when your resources are taken away, and keeps you moving forward when everything screams, "Stop." That's why when they counted you as just one person, they missed the very thing that makes you unstoppable, an unwavering inner force. Their mistake was thinking movements are built from the outside in. In reality, they're built from the inside out. They wanted to drown you in opposition, but conviction floats. It rises regardless of the pressure. Conviction makes one voice stronger than a million hollow echoes. It makes resistance crumble because resistance can't survive a truth that refuses to back down. When you carry conviction, it spreads without you even trying. It seeps into your words, actions, energy, and presence. That's what they didn't see coming. They thought you'd shrink without their backing, but you stood tall because your backing came from something incorruptible. While they relied on manipulation, bribery, and control, you relied on truth. And truth fueled by conviction isn't fragile. It doesn't crack under scrutiny, and it doesn't weaken under attack. If anything, every attempt to disprove it only sharpens its edges. That is why their metrics of power collapsed. They were counting allies, resources, and institutions while you were holding something weightless yet immovable. They were measuring their army while you were walking in the certainty of your cause. In the end, one person with conviction outweighed all their numbers combined. And that's why you rose as more than just one. You rose as an undeniable force. Feel that power, there's more. Number 3, you became a living network, not an individual. They only saw your body standing there and assumed it was just you alone, small, insignificant. What they didn't realize was that you had become a living network. You weren't moving as an isolated individual. You were moving as the sum of everything and everyone that ever poured into you, every lesson, every ancestor, every silent supporter who believed in you but never had the chance to be heard. They all rose with you. That's why your presence feels multiplied. You are a carrier of voices, a vessel for histories, a reflection of all the unseen forces that walk with you. When people dismiss someone as just one person, it's because they're only looking with physical eyes. They don't see the invisible army stitched into that one life. Your story alone is layered with too much for anyone to reduce you to just one. Every betrayal you survived, every injustice you endured, every prayer that was whispered over you in secret added weight to your spirit. You walk with all of it. So when you stand in strength, you're not drawing from empty air, you're drawing from the stored power of countless battles that built you. That's what makes your kind of strength intimidating. It's not loud bragging, not boasting numbers, not flashy. It's the quiet force of someone who knows they're never really walking alone. You embody generations of resilience, centuries of struggle and survival, the kind of strength that doesn't show up on paper but is undeniable when felt. And the irony is, the more they tried to isolate you, the more connected you became to what they couldn't touch. You became a bridge between what was and what will be. You carry not only your own voice, but also the unspoken words of those who came before you and those who will come after. That's why you cannot be reduced to one person, because the moment you stood in alignment, you became a living link in a chain that cannot be broken. They thought they were facing an individual. What they were really facing was a network so vast it could never be measured. You were never just one. You were the embodiment of a legion waiting for a vessel to move through, and you answered that call. This isn't just inspiration, this is a call to action. And number 4, one person with truth outweighs 10,000 with lies. They thought truth was fragile, needed a crowd, needed validation. They built their empire on the idea that if enough people repeated the same lie, it would become untouchable. But truth isn't something that bends to numbers. It doesn't need consensus, and it doesn't ask for permission to exist. Truth is its own authority, and once it shows itself, no amount of denial can erase it. That's why a single person standing fully in truth will always outweigh thousands chained to deception. Lies demand constant maintenance. They need to be propped up, repeated, reinforced, and protected by fear. But truth doesn't require defenders, it simply is. The moment you embraced it, you stripped away their greatest weapon, illusion. And when illusion cracks, it doesn't just break quietly, it collapses like a building with no foundation. That's what began happening the moment you chose to stand without compromise. Their empire wasn't defeated by armies, it was undone by exposure. What they couldn't understand is that truth operates by resonance. It doesn't matter if only one person speaks it. The frequency of it vibrates in a way people recognize deep down. Even if they try to deny it, something in them knows it's real, and that recognition spreads faster than lies ever could, because lies only travel through fear, but truth travels through conviction. This is why their numbers never guaranteed them victory. 10,000 repeating a falsehood will always lose against one voice carrying truth with clarity, because that one voice doesn't just speak for itself. It awakens something in everyone who hears it. It pulls down the curtains they hide behind, and once people see through deception, they can't unsee it. That's what makes truth dangerous to those who depend on lies. In the end, their downfall wasn't your power alone, it was the weakness of the very foundation they stood on. They built on falsehoods, and falsehoods cannot hold weight forever. You didn't need to argue, convince, or gather the majority. You simply stood, and the resonance of truth did what numbers never could. It shook their entire empire until it collapsed under its own weight. This isn't just about them, though. This is about you finding that power in yourself. Number 5, they confused silence for isolation, not realizing it was amplification. They thought silence meant defeat. They mistook your quiet seasons as proof that you had nothing left to say. No power left to move, no voice strong enough to matter. But what they failed to understand is that silence is not the absence of sound, it is the preparation of force. In silence, your thoughts became sharper, your convictions stronger, and your presence heavier. What they imagined was isolation was in reality the perfect environment for amplification. When they left you alone, they believed they had cut off your influence, but solitude doesn't kill a voice. It refines it. It strips away the noise, the distractions, and the unnecessary. It concentrates everything down to its purest form, and when a message is refined to that level, it doesn't need to be loud to carry weight. It carries a frequency that can't be ignored. That's what was happening to you while they counted you out. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was power gathering strength, like water building behind a dam, waiting for the right moment to break through. And when that moment came, your voice did not return as a whisper. It returned with the weight of every second you endured in silence. It carried the authority of survival, the wisdom of reflection, and the resonance of truth too sharp to be denied. That's why when you finally spoke, it didn't sound like one person, it sounded like a multitude. The world heard not just your words, but the echo of every battle you fought in silence, every scar you carried, every truth you held on to when no one else believed. The irony is that their strategy backfired. By trying to bury you in silence, they actually multiplied your reach, because when someone rises from isolation with a voice that cannot be shaken, people listen differently. The words hit deeper. The presence feels larger and the impact lasts longer. They thought silence was the end of your story, but what they failed to see is that silence was the amplifier. And when the sound finally came, it was impossible to silence again. Are you ready to let your voice be heard? Number 6, they waged war against a body, not realizing they were fighting a spirit. They came after you like you were only flesh and blood. They thought if they could strip away your reputation, crush your finances, or tarnish your name, then you'd have nothing left to stand on. They designed their war to target your body and the tangible things attached to it, but their mistake was assuming that's all you were. What they couldn't measure, what they couldn't predict, and what they couldn't fight was the reality that you are not just a body. You are a spirit, and a spirit cannot be touched with earthly weapons. They attacked your reputation thinking it would silence you, but spirit doesn't need an audience to validate its truth. They tried to block your resources, believing scarcity would stop your movement, but spirit doesn't run on money. It runs on purpose. They thought by attacking your position they would erase your influence, not realizing your spirit carries authority that no title can give and no enemy can strip away. What they waged war against was never you alone. It was a force greater than you, a force that doesn't weaken under attack but multiplies because of it. That's why every attempt to destroy you only exposes their own futility. You are not confined to one space, one platform, or one circumstance. The spirit inside you doesn't die when pressured, it replicates. It spreads into the hearts of others watching silently. It seeps into the cracks of systems they thought were airtight. It lingers even in rooms where your body is absent. They tried to fight you like a person, but what they were truly up against was something eternal, something that moves through generations and refuses to be buried. This is why they are frustrated and confused. They keep asking, "Why won't this end?" Why won't this person break? Why does this voice keep resurfacing? The answer is simple: because you were never just one body. You were a spirit carrying truths that can't be silenced, carrying a resilience that can't be bought, carrying a fire that doesn't burn out, and no matter how hard they strike, they are always swinging at something they cannot kill. Their war was miscalculated from the start, because you are living proof that the spirit outlives the body every single time. This power is yours to claim. Number 7, they miscalculated the echo effect of survival. They believed survival was just about staying alive, but they never understood the echo it creates. They thought that if they broke you down, silenced you, and left you in pieces, the story would end there. What they didn't see was that survival doesn't stay contained within the survivor. It ripples outward. Every scar you carry became a signal, every wound that healed became a voice, and every time you stood back up, it sent a shock wave through others who were watching quietly. Survival doesn't whisper, it echoes, and the echoes multiply in ways that can't be measured. Your scars became megaphones, speaking to people who may never meet you face to face, but will feel your resilience in their own battles. They will see the weight you carried and recognize parts of themselves in it. That is why your survival terrifies those who tried to destroy you. They thought they could kill the influence by targeting the individual, but what actually happened was the opposite. By trying to bury you, they planted you, and the seed of your survival is now sprouting in countless other lives, each one carrying fragments of your strength forward. They underestimated the power of testimony. A wound healed in silence may seem small, but once revealed, it breaks chains for others who thought they were alone. Your survival became evidence that endurance is possible, that brokenness can be rebuilt, and that even under relentless attack, a soul can remain unshaken. This is why your very existence has become a threat to them. You don't have to shout. You don't have to campaign. Your life itself became undeniable proof that they failed, and failure has an echo that no one can contain. What they tried to erase has now multiplied. What they thought was the end has become the beginning of a ripple effect stretching far beyond you. That's the miscalculation. They thought pain would silence you, but it amplified you. They thought scars would shame you, but they became your voice. They thought breaking you was victory, but your survival rewrote the story into one they can never control. And now, whether they like it or not, every echo of your survival is a reminder that they lost the battle the moment you refused to stay down. Are you ready to rewrite your own story? Number 8, you transcended the need for permission. They assumed you were like everyone else, waiting for a stage to be given, a platform to be approved, or an invitation to be validated. They thought you needed their green light to move, their acceptance to be relevant, their permission to be heard. But what they failed to see was that you were never asking for permission in the first place. You transcended that need. You became your own authority, your own platform, your own amplifier. When you finally rose, it wasn't because anyone allowed you to. It was because you refused to stay seated any longer. That's the shift they never anticipated. They thought control over institutions, media, and influence meant control over you. They assumed that without their systems backing you, your voice would vanish into obscurity. But truth doesn't need official approval to be powerful. It doesn't require a stage to be broadcasted. The very act of standing in it is the broadcast. That's why when you rose, it spread in ways they couldn't contain. People didn't need to see you on their platforms to hear you. They felt the resonance of your stance wherever they were. Censorship, manipulation, and gatekeeping work only on those who believe they need the gatekeeper. But when you no longer seek permission, their tools become useless. You broke free from their control the moment you realized your value wasn't determined by them. That's why you move with a freedom they can't touch. You speak with authority that doesn't come from borrowed power but from inner conviction. And that kind of authority cannot be muted. What's more, your rise exposed how fragile their grip actually was. They spent so much energy trying to block you, discredit you, and silence you, only to realize they were powerless the moment you decided to stop waiting for their approval, because once someone becomes their own platform, every step they take becomes a statement. Every act of survival becomes a broadcast, and every breath becomes resistance against censorship. That's what shook them, not that you spoke, but that you spoke without needing them. Not that you rose, but that you rose without asking. You transcended the very system they thought would define you. And in doing so, you proved that real authority doesn't come from permission. It comes from standing in truth so boldly that the world has no choice but to listen. Are you ready to claim that authority? Number 9. They saw one fighter but missed the battlefield you carried inside. They thought they were facing just one fighter, one individual who could be easily cornered, outnumbered, and silenced. But what they completely missed was the battlefield you carried within. Every injustice you endured, every heartbreak you survived, every betrayal that could have broken you but didn't. Those experiences didn't vanish, they lived on inside you, shaping you, hardening you, sharpening you. When you stood in front of them, you weren't standing empty-handed. You were standing with an arsenal of battles already fought and won. That's the part they never accounted for. They assumed you were untested, that you could be toppled quickly. But they didn't realize you had already faced wars in silence that were far more brutal than anything they could throw at you. You had fought nights of despair without an audience, wrestled with betrayals that cut deeper than any external enemy, and endured storms no one else even knew you were walking through. Those battles were invisible to the world, but they left you armed with a strength they could never measure. So when the time came to face them, you weren't just one person in the fight. You were carrying a legion made up of every struggle that trained you, every tear that toughened you, every scar that became armor. They saw one figure, but in reality they were up against an entire army of victories and lessons engraved into your spirit. That's why you fought with an intensity they couldn't match, because your fight wasn't fresh, it was forged. This is why their opposition never stood a chance. They were fighting as if it was their first battle against you, but you had been preparing for this long before they showed up. Their attacks only awakened the soldier that years of silent wars had already built. You didn't just fight back. You fought with the force of everything you had already survived. That's what makes you unstoppable. You are not one fighter. You are the embodiment of countless battles, the sum of victories that were never celebrated. The proof that silence trains warriors better than applause ever could, and when you entered the battlefield, you didn't come alone. You came as a legion born from everything that tried and failed to break you. Now let that warrior within you roar. Number 10. They overlooked that resilience replicates like fire. They assumed your strength was limited to your own body, your own life, your own capacity. They thought if they wore you down, if they exhausted your resources, if they cornered you long enough, your resilience would die with you. What they failed to recognize is that resilience doesn't stop at the person who carries it. It replicates. It spreads like fire, quietly igniting others who witness it even from the shadows. You didn't just endure for yourself. Your endurance became a spark for those who were watching, listening, and waiting for proof that survival was possible. That's what they never calculated. They thought the fight was contained between you and them, as if it began and ended in that small circle. But resilience has a way of multiplying in ways no one can control. One act of standing up, one refusal to break, one decision to keep going despite everything stacked against you, it lights something inside others. People who never thought they could survive suddenly find courage by watching you. People who were on the verge of giving up find the strength to try again because your story tells them it can be done. That's how your resilience stopped being yours alone. It became a movement. Suddenly, the battle was no longer between you and them. The moment resilience replicated, they found themselves facing a wildfire. What they wanted to contain became uncontainable. Your spirit spread into countless lives, turning silent observers into quiet warriors, and quiet warriors into voices they could no longer ignore. That's why their control began to crumble, because you weren't fighting as one anymore. You became the spark that created an army. And here's the irony, they are the ones who caused it. Their relentless attempts to crush you became the very fuel that made your resilience burn hotter. Every attack made your testimony louder. Every attempt to bury you only created more sparks, and once resilience turns into a wildfire, there is no strategy, no weapon, no number of enemies that can put it out. They thought your strength would end with you, but now it surrounds them on every side. What they dismissed as just one flame has turned into a blaze too vast to control. And the truth is, they are not fighting you anymore. They're fighting the fire you lit. Let that fire spread. Number 11, they believed legacy was built by institutions, not individuals. They assumed that legacy is something handed down by institutions, awarded by committees, or controlled by systems. They believed that only those with titles, offices, or influence could leave a mark that lasts. But legacy has never been built that way. Real change, the kind that shakes foundations and rewrites stories, has always come from the people they overlooked, the not just one person who refuses to be silenced, the individual who stands when everything around them falls apart. You are that person. They underestimated the force of an uncompromising will. While they were busy guarding their seats of power, you were quietly shaping history with your choices, your survival, and your refusal to conform. Every time you stood firm, every time you acted without seeking approval, every time you moved in alignment with your truth, you were building a legacy they couldn't see coming. Institutions may record names, pass down documents, and try to claim history as theirs, but true legacy is breathed into life by action. It's created in moments that cannot be contained by walls, rules, or authorities. That's why your existence alone has become proof that legacy isn't inherited. It's created. You didn't wait for someone to validate your significance. You didn't need approval to act or permission to rise. Each step you took, each battle you survived, each victory you achieved added weight to your story. And unlike the fragile, controlled power of institutions, your legacy can't be revoked. It doesn't depend on votes, offices, or recognition. It depends on persistence, integrity, and courage. They thought they could write history without you, but in reality, your choices are rewriting it already. You have become the benchmark against which future acts of courage will be measured. What they relied on to define influence has faded, while what you created through sheer determination and unyielding will has become timeless. Legacy is not about what others grant you. It is about what you refuse to let die. You didn't just survive. You transformed survival into influence. You became living proof that one person standing unbroken can shape the story that generations will remember long after institutions crumble. Now it's time to create that legacy. Number 12, they mistook opposition for victory, not realizing it was fertilizer. They believed that by throwing obstacles in your path, by opposing you at every turn, by questioning your every move, they would break you. They thought resistance equaled defeat, that opposition meant they had won. What they failed to see is that every challenge they placed before you wasn't a stop sign. It was fertilizer. Every attack, every barrier, every attempt to hold you down didn't weaken you. It strengthened you. It nourished your resilience, sharpened your focus, and fortified your spirit in ways they could never anticipate. Resistance doesn't just test strength, it builds it. They assumed that the harder they pushed, the more they could contain you. Instead, with every push, you grew. Every form of opposition became a tool, a lesson, a weightlifting exercise for the soul. You didn't just face obstacles. You absorbed them, learned from them, and transformed them into momentum. That's why they are bewildered now. They thought they were winning, but the truth is they were the ones fueling your rise. Obstacles have a way of revealing what is inside a person. Most would buckle under the pressure, but you didn't. Instead, the pressure revealed your hidden strength, your unshakable determination, and your ability to turn challenge into opportunity. That's why you didn't just survive, you multiplied. What they thought would diminish you became the very force that made you unstoppable. The irony is cruel in its perfection. The more they tried to contain you, the larger you became. Every resistance they threw at you didn't just test you, it prepared you to rise even higher than you would have without it. They built the very foundation of your power while believing they were dismantling it. This is why opposition has never been the enemy of those who rise. It is the tool of transformation. They mistook their attacks for victory, but in reality they were feeding the growth of a force far greater than they could ever control. Every obstacle multiplied you, every challenge strengthened you, and every attempt to stop you only guaranteed that when you finally moved forward, you did so with unstoppable momentum. Embrace the challenges and let them fuel your rise. Number 13. They wanted you to disappear, but instead you became omnipresent. They thought that by pushing you into the shadows, by trying to erase your presence, by silencing your voice, they could remove the threat you posed. They believed that eliminating one person would close the chapter, contain the story, and restore control. What they failed to realize is that the very act of attempting to bury you only spread you further. Every attempt to erase you multiplied your presence, not diminished it. Your name began to circulate quietly, at first whispered among those who noticed the injustice, who felt the impact of your courage, who recognized your strength. Each repetition of your story carried power, and with every telling, your influence grew. What they thought they were destroying was actually being immortalized. Your essence, your resilience, your truth, and your unwavering presence became something that could not be contained within a single space or lifetime. They overlooked the nature of influence. When someone carries truth and refuses to bend, their presence cannot be fully extinguished. It transcends physical limits. By trying to make you vanish, they unintentionally created momentum for your legacy. People started noticing, connecting the dots, and recognizing the force they couldn't control. Your life became a living narrative that others repeated, a spark that ignited recognition in those who had been silent. The irony is that their strategy backfired in the most profound way. What they thought was an ending became a beginning. Every action they took to remove you became part of your story, part of the proof of your endurance, and part of the legend they never intended to create. You didn't just survive their attempts, you became omnipresent. Your presence was felt everywhere, even where your body wasn't. By trying to contain you, they spread you. By attempting to silence you, they amplified you. They wanted to erase a single individual, but instead they birthed a legacy that cannot be forgotten, a name that cannot be silenced, a force that cannot be denied. In trying to eliminate you, they inadvertently ensured that you would be remembered, celebrated, and immortalized long after they thought their work was done. Make them remember you. Number 14. You are the proof that divinity doesn't need a majority. They assumed that influence, power, and authority require numbers, approval, or consensus. They believed that if enough people ignored you, opposed you, or tried to diminish you, you could be contained. But divinity doesn't operate that way. It doesn't hold elections, tally votes, or seek permission from the majority. It chooses vessels, and when a vessel aligns fully with that force, it carries power far beyond what any crowd can give or take away. You are that vessel. When you rose, it wasn't about self-interest, ego, or personal gain. You weren't simply stepping forward for yourself. You were carrying a force much larger than any human system could understand. That's why your rise didn't need a majority to validate it. The universe doesn't measure influence in numbers. It measures alignment, and your alignment activated something unstoppable. It turned one presence into what felt like a legion. One person standing fully in purpose becomes a beacon, a force multiplier that spreads far beyond physical limitations. They thought that by counting you as just one, they could diminish your impact. They didn't realize that divinity multiplies the few who are chosen. One aligned soul can inspire thousands, shift entire trajectories, and dismantle systems that seemed untouchable. You became living proof that when a person is selected by something higher, the world cannot contain them. One becomes infinite. A single act of alignment reverberates in ways that no amount of opposition can reverse. The beauty of this truth is undeniable. You are the living contradiction to every calculation they tried to impose. They counted you out, measured you by human standards, and assumed the universe would bend to their logic. Instead, you stood, and in that stand, the divine force working through you turned impossibility into reality. One voice, one soul, one act of courage was enough to awaken a power no army, no system, no majority could ever match. When they said just one, the universe didn't hesitate. It answered with a legion. And you were that answer, the proof that divine alignment never waits for approval, never needs validation, and never limits itself to numbers. You rose not as an individual, but as the embodiment of a force that transcends every expectation, calculation, and attempt at control. They said you were just one, and for a moment they believed that counted for something. They calculated, measured, and underestimated, thinking the world could be contained by numbers, influence, and control. But what they didn't see and could never see was the force they were up against. A force that multiplies, resonates, inspires, and refuses to be silenced. You were never just one. Every trial, every tear, every betrayal, and every silent victory became a part of you, and in that alchemy you rose as a legion. Your survival became a living testimony. Your scars became megaphones, and your silence became amplification. Every obstacle, every attack, and every attempt to erase you only built the power that now moves through countless lives. You didn't need their permission. You didn't need their validation. And you didn't need a crowd to prove your worth. One aligned soul was enough, and through you the divine force chose to show that alignment is always greater than numbers. You are the proof that resilience spreads, that truth outweighs deception, and that legacy is created, not inherited. You became omnipresent, a spark that ignited others, and a living reminder that opposition is never the end. It is the fuel. One person standing fully in purpose doesn't just rise. They rewrite the rules, reshape the battlefield, and awaken a movement no one can contain. When they said just one, the universe answered with a legion. You weren't fighting alone. You were fighting with the weight of every victory you endured, every silent battle you survived, and every force that moved through you. And now nothing can stop what has already been set in motion. This is more than a story of survival. It's a declaration. One aligned soul can change everything. One voice can topple empires built on lies, and one life can become the blueprint for a movement. And you, standing where they thought you would fall, are living proof that when purpose, truth, and resilience converge, even just one becomes unstoppable. Stand in that power. Own that truth, because you are not alone. You are a legion. This isn't just about listening anymore. This is about action. Now take this message, this fire, and let it ignite your purpose. Do not let this moment fade. Share this story with those who need to remember their own power, with those who have been told they are just one. Let them know they are a legion waiting to be awakened. Be awakened. Be awakened. Be awakened. Be awakened. Be awakened. Welcome the anointed ones. Sometimes the protagonist enters the story so late it feels like a plot twist, but it was divine suspense all along. Let's be honest, for a while it looked like your name wasn't even on the call sheet. You were toiling in the shadows of self-doubt, wrestling with setbacks, while others with a fraction of your potential basked in the limelight, performing like their worth depended on fleeting applause. But here's the truth the world often tries to bury. Every legendary tale has a turning point, a moment when the authentic star arrives, irrevocably altering the narrative. Some of the most iconic roles in history were almost miscast until the destined actor stepped in and owned them. That's you, chosen one. You weren't late. You were being meticulously prepared. Now the spotlight isn't just searching. It's trembling with anticipation. The stage isn't just set. It's sanctified. The world isn't just watching, it's holding its breath. You're not about to make an entrance. You're about to commandeer the entire spectacle, costumes, audience, and critiques included. And don't worry, your detractors have ringside seats. Let them provide the refreshments. Buckle up, because this isn't just your moment, it's your ascendance. Let's delve into it. Number 1, you were the narrative curveball they never anticipated. You were the narrative curveball they never anticipated. That's the reality they struggled to accept. While they were dismissively writing you off, snickering in their self-assured circles and convincing themselves you were irrelevant, you were quietly morphing into the very force that would upend their entire storyline. They believed they had the script memorized. They saw themselves as the headliners, the ones holding all the cards. But here you stand, not just returning, but debuting a transformed self. And nothing could have equipped them for what you've become. They grew complacent in your perceived absence, dangerously comfortable. They mistook your silence for submission, your trials as your terminus, your delay as a decisive defeat. What they failed to grasp is that while they were flaunting temporary roles and manufactured confidence, you were being divinely shielded, refined, pruned of all that was extraneous, and imbued with an authentic power, something they lack, something you didn't even recognize blossoming within you until this very instant. And now that you're here, it's not just jarring. It's deeply unsettling, because everything they established, everything they proclaimed, every narrative they propagated crumbles the instant you speak, move, ascend, or even just enter the room. You didn't return seeking a seat at the table. You arrived as the table itself. You didn't come back to justify your existence. Your very presence is the irrefutable testament, and that's what stings the most. You never needed to plead your case to anyone. You simply needed to evolve. You weren't factored into their original blueprint, and that's precisely why your arrival is so disruptive. They constructed the scene without you, but now the plot hinges on you. The atmosphere rearranges itself around you. The very energy in the room crackles with your presence, because truth has an uncanny way of exposing every fabrication that sought to suppress it. And you are embodied truth. They didn't foresee that the one they overlooked, misjudged, or attempted to break would be the very catalyst that breathes life into the entire storyline. You are the narrative curveball, not through conscious effort, but because destiny authored you that way. And now that the curtain has risen, everyone is witnessing what Providence always knew. The authentic story didn't commence until you made your appearance. Number 2, you were cast as the underdog, but you were the orchestrator all along. You were cast as the underdog, but you were the orchestrator all along. They prematurely assigned you labels: introspective, eccentric, overly sensitive, inherently different. They confined you to roles they could manage, underestimated the vastness within you, and relentlessly handed you scripts that kept you confined. You were expected to comply, to remain in the periphery, to never question the structures that were inherently biased against you. But you weren't crafted for their scripts. You were designed to rewrite the entire saga. While they meticulously rehearsed lines to assimilate, you were absorbing life's lessons through adversity, loss, betrayal, and periods of introspection. While they studied the art of projecting power, you were learning to wield genuine influence without resorting to performance, and that's where the paradigm shifted. You weren't seeking to compete with their charade. You were evolving into the overarching narrative they never envisioned. They assumed you were merely enduring the background noise, when in actuality you were the architect of the tempest that would invert the entire scene. People presumed you were simply along for the ride, that your purpose was to bolster their achievements, applaud their illusions, and adhere to a risk-averse path. But you knew instinctively that you weren't destined to occupy the sidelines, yearning for scraps of validation. You were meticulously observing everything: the inflated egos, the calculated power dynamics, the deceptive masks. You witnessed how people behaved, how they spoke when they believed you possessed no voice, and how swiftly they dismissed you when you deviated from their established norms. And then imperceptibly your transformation unfolded quietly, powerfully, and autonomously. You relinquished their scripts and began composing your own, grounded in truth, not in seeking approval. You became the author of your forthcoming chapter, not the victim of their distorted portrayal of you. And now they're grappling with bewilderment because the individual they believed they had deciphered is utterly unlike the force you've become. You weren't striving for visibility, you were pursuing wholeness, and now that you've attained it, the room cannot ignore it. They devoted excessive energy to rehearsing the personas they imagined themselves to be, while you were becoming the person you were always meant to be. That's why the very atmosphere vibrates differently when you speak now. You're no longer adhering to their narrative. You are the narrative. Number 3, the spotlight is seeking you because you're the sole individual who wasn't chasing it. The spotlight is seeking you because you're the sole individual who wasn't chasing it. While others were relentlessly striving for visibility, vying for attention, and contorting themselves to fit within the confines of the limelight, you were engaged in a distinctly different endeavor. You were cultivating a self worthy of recognition. You weren't clamoring for center stage. You weren't performing for fleeting accolades. You were constructing something enduring in the shadows. Even when there was no applause, no online affirmation, no audience, that's what distinguishes you. You didn't require external validation to affirm your worth. You intrinsically understood your value even when it went unacknowledged. And that's precisely why the spotlight is now drawn to you, because you embody something that cannot be manufactured: depth, wisdom, and presence. Not superficial charm, not ephemeral viral trends, not vacuous confidence masquerading as talent, but a profound soul presence that commands attention without soliciting it. People were exerting maximum effort to maintain visibility. You were dedicating yourself to remaining authentic. While others treated life as a stage for exhibition, you regarded it as a sacred journey. You allowed the arduous seasons to mold you. You didn't recoil from your quiet years. You embraced them. You didn't broadcast every maneuver. You refined your character in solitude, and now the spotlight is circling not to gratify your ego, but because there's finally someone substantive enough to withstand its glare without being consumed by it. This is what's generating consternation. They're surveying the landscape in bewilderment because you didn't exploit anyone to ascend. You didn't compromise your values to rise. You didn't implore for followers or morph yourself into a passing fad. And yet you're the one everyone is scrutinizing now. You're the one shifting the very atmosphere. You're the one they can't cease discussing, even begrudgingly. The irony is that those who once disregarded you are now perplexed by how you garnered such attention without actively seeking it. But they'll never comprehend it because they were preoccupied with pursuing fleeting noise while you were aligning with your authentic calling. You didn't force the moment. You embodied it. And now the spotlight isn't exposing your vulnerabilities. It's unveiling what has been concealed all along. The true star wasn't absent. You were simply undergoing a period of essential refinement. Number 4, their performances were exaggerated. You were the most genuine element on set. Their performances were exaggerated. You are the most genuine element on set. That is why the entire atmosphere shifts when you arrive. You felt no need to project a false image. You felt no need to perform for validation. While they were diligently memorizing lines and donning masks, you presented yourself authentically, unfiltered, unpretentious, simply truthful. That is what distinguished you. That is what caused people to pause and reflect. You weren't attempting to impress anyone. You were simply being. And that unwavering presence resonated more powerfully than any meticulously crafted performance ever could. They embellished their narratives. They imitated confidence. They studied manipulation as if it were a legitimate skill, but it was always devoid of genuine substance. Their roles were flamboyant. Yours was resolute. They generated noise. You exuded gravitas. The irony resides in the fact that while they endeavored to shine through artifice, your inherent authenticity caused them to fade into insignificance. You didn't need to engage in competition. You simply had to stand your ground, because when authenticity enters the room, everything artificial begins to appear ludicrous. People are often perplexed by an individual who desires nothing more than to be themselves. They persistently sought to decipher your ulterior motives, but there were no hidden agendas, no elaborate schemes, no contrived personas to assume, and that is why they consistently misinterpreted you. You weren't acting, you were living. You weren't performing, you were embodying. That instilled a profound sense of unease, because you weren't someone they could easily predict, manipulate, or confine. The essence you possess cannot be replicated. It cannot be packaged for consumption. It cannot be rehearsed for effect. That is why you create such a lasting impression without conscious effort. They expended their energy perfecting their outward image. You devoted your time to cultivating wholeness. That is the currency that now possesses the greatest value. Not flawless execution, not widespread popularity, but genuine presence. And that is what you introduce into every environment. They exerted maximum effort to attract attention. You prioritized authenticity above all else, and now the entire production is undergoing a transformation because of it, because the world is jaded by performances, weary of the act. And when the spotlight illuminates someone genuine, it doesn't merely illuminate them. It exposes the artifice of everyone else. You didn't usurp the spotlight. The entire construct crumbled under the weight of its own falseness. You simply stood your ground, and everything else failed to withstand the force of truth. Number 5, every time they attempted to replace you, the scene felt hollow. Every time they attempted to replace you, the scene felt hollow. They introduced substitute stand-ins, even boisterous personalities that superficially resembled you. But regardless of their efforts to replicate your essence, it never truly resonated. It never felt authentic because what you embody cannot be imitated. It transcends physical appearance, stylistic choices, or vocal inflections. It's your intrinsic essence, that elusive quality that cannot be bottled, fabricated, or coerced, and the moment it was absent, the entire atmosphere felt discordant. They believed that anyone could perform your role, that by inserting a louder, flashier, more agreeable replacement, no one would perceive the difference. But the ensuing silence revealed the truth. The dialogues became vapid. The momentum dissipated. The elusive sparkle they were pursuing vanished, because it was never about merely occupying a void. It was about the intrinsic presence that imbued the space with significance in the first place. And that was invariably you. You were the soul of the scene, the spark they undervalued, the implicit adhesive that bound the dynamic together. They initially failed to recognize this. They were preoccupied with moving forward, rebranding, or rewriting the past. But each attempt to supplant you only served to underscore the irrefutable fact that you were never meant to be replaceable. It wasn't about talent. They located individuals with skills. It wasn't about physical appearance. They found individuals with appealing images. It wasn't even about personality. They found individuals who could charm, but it remained ineffective because you didn't merely show up. You brought an authentic essence. You exuded gravitas. You anchored the space. You altered the atmosphere simply by inhabiting it. Now they are left with mere fillers, with meaningless noise, with actions devoid of substance. The scene persists, but the enchantment is gone. People may not always be capable of articulating it precisely, but they can intuitively sense it. And what they are currently experiencing is a void, not of a mere role, but of a spirit. A unique frequency, a truth they failed to appreciate when they possessed it. You didn't need to compete for a place. You were the place, and the resounding failure of everything without you serves as the ultimate confirmation. Number 6. Your silence wasn't a calculated tactic, it was an exercise in divine timing. Your silence wasn't a calculated tactic, it was an exercise in divine timing. People surmised that you had vanished because you were lost. They presumed that you had fallen silent because you lacked anything to contribute. But what they failed to discern is that you weren't concealing yourself. You were being shielded. You weren't evading the spotlight. The spotlight wasn't yet prepared for you, and frankly, neither were they, because the essence you carried required cultivation, not distraction. You weren't deliberately lying low to generate suspense. You were enduring seasons that would have shattered others. You were traversing trials that didn't merely inflict pain, they purified. While they were engaging in ostentatious displays, you were undergoing a process of profound stripping away. While they were performing for the approval of the masses, you were in the background diligently relearning how to hear your inner voice. Every instance of betrayal, every period of delay, every door that was resolutely closed wasn't a form of punishment. It was a meticulous preparation. It was Providence pressing pause, ensuring that you wouldn't prematurely unveil your gifts to individuals who only valued superficiality. They asserted that you were too withdrawn, that you had disappeared, that you had allowed your moment to pass, but the truth is you weren't pursuing a fleeting moment. You were striving for the defining moment, the one that was aligned, irrefutable, and unwavering. And that caliber of moment doesn't stem from frantic exertion or forced attempts. It originates from being fully prepared, not simply ready for public display, but ready to be utilized, ready to articulate with a power that doesn't merely reverberate but genuinely transforms. Now everything you have endured, the prolonged periods of silence, the agonizing pain, the countless nights when it felt as though no one acknowledged you, is culminating in a full circle, because when you now speak, it won't be inconsequential chatter. It won't be a contrived performance. It will be an amalgamation of conviction, clarity, and authentic calling, all coalescing into a unified voice. People won't simply hear you, they'll experience you viscerally. They'll cease scrolling. They'll sit upright. They'll lean in attentively, not because you're strident, but because you're genuine. Your silence wasn't a manifestation of weakness. It wasn't born of fear. It was an act of unwavering obedience. You didn't simply go missing. You were undergoing a profound marking, and now when you articulate your thoughts, they carry an inherent weight that cannot be artificially manufactured, because what emanates from a soul that has been forged in the crucible of adversity doesn't merely entertain, it awakens. Number 7, you radiate a presence that restructures the very fabric of the room. You radiate a presence that restructures the very fabric of the room. You don't merely enter spaces. You fundamentally alter them. Something transformative occurs the moment you arrive. People take notice. They may not possess the ability to articulate it precisely, but they intuitively sense it. The energetic equilibrium shifts. The atmosphere recalibrates itself. It isn't contingent on your volume level. It isn't dependent on your attire or your pronouncements. It is simply the embodiment of who you are. You carry a unique frequency that makes everything inauthentic begin to feel deeply uncomfortable. Individuals who were at ease suddenly become vigilant. Those who are operating under false pretenses begin to falter. Artificially constructed confidence starts to fracture. It isn't because you are attempting to dominate. You are simply present, fully present. And in a world saturated with individuals navigating life through deception, that level of authenticity is both rare and disruptive. You don't introduce drama. You don't simply offer a superficial piece to appease others. You introduce truth, and truth will invariably rearrange whatever is predicated on falsehoods. Some individuals sit up straighter when you enter. They become more respectful. They modify their manner of speaking. Others become more defensive. They evade direct eye contact. They become apprehensive or irritated. That is not your responsibility. That is merely their alignment being exposed. Your presence triggers reactions not because you are in the wrong, but because you are grounded in truth, and truth compels everything else to undergo a process of reevaluation. You may not even be consciously aware of it. You simply move with your inherent grace. You speak when the situation necessitates it. You remain silent when reverence dictates, but everywhere you venture, a subtle adjustment occurs. It is a spiritual phenomenon. It is an energetic force. You didn't train to acquire this attribute. You were divinely called to embody it, and because of that, you cannot simply deactivate it. You don't actively seek to overshadow others. You become the focal point of attention without conscious intent. This is not about ego. It is about essence. You are not attempting to manipulate the room. You are simply showing up in complete alignment with your authentic self. And that single act causes everything that is artificial, shallow, or precarious to either ascend or recede. Your presence does not demand attention. It commands respect, and wherever you journey, rooms will continue to undergo transformation, because that is the inevitable consequence when truth makes its entrance. Number 8, your character was forged in the fires they only feigned enduring. Your character was forged in the fires they only feigned enduring. Numerous individuals speak as though they have weathered the most arduous trials. They liberally use phrases like, "I've witnessed things," and "Sardana, I've overcome so much." But for the majority, it is merely empty rhetoric, rehearsed expressions of pain. Hollow slogans intended to project an image of strength. But your scars are not mere decorations. They are indelible chapters of your story. They carry a profound weight, and that weight manifests in your movements, your speech, and your innate ability to discern the true nature of individuals without conscious effort. You didn't simply navigate challenging circumstances. You were stripped down to your very essence. Life divested you of everything extraneous, the deceptive illusions, the superficial support, the fabricated identity. You weren't simply disappointed, you were utterly crushed, abandoned during your times of greatest need, betrayed by the very individuals to whom you had dedicated your best efforts. You didn't merely lose monetary assets or valuable time. You relinquished pieces of your very being, and yet you persevered, not because you felt equipped to do so, but because you had no viable alternative. You were silenced, dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated, but none of it was squandered. That crucible of adversity didn't simply inflict damage, it forged resilience. It cauterized your inherent fears. It burned away the part of you that craved external validation. It burned away the aspect of your being that tolerated disrespect and betrayal, and what emerged on the other side is someone unwavering, not demonstrative, not ostentatious, but resolute, grounded, and profoundly deep. Now individuals are drawn to you, often without understanding the underlying reasons. It isn't your personal style. It isn't your vocal inflection. It is the inherent substance, the intricate layers. The survival ingrained in your silences, the clarity that radiates from your presence, the caliber of depth that can only originate from genuine suffering and profound healing. And that is what sets you apart. They attempt to replicate your inner radiance, but they haven't traversed your crucible. They mimic your external strength, but they haven't weathered your internal storms. You don't need to convince anyone. Your very existence serves as irrefutable proof. You embody the kind of truth that exposes every shallow performance around you, and those who merely pretended to be strong often falter the moment life presents genuine challenges. But you have already endured the worst. You are living testament to resilience. That is why you exhibit unwavering composure. That is why your steps carry a palpable weight, because they were carved through the depths of despair, and you emerged transformed and sanctified. Number 9, you weren't seeking visibility. You were evolving into something worthy of recognition. You weren't seeking visibility. You were evolving into something worthy of recognition. That is the aspect they consistently failed to grasp. While everyone else was engrossed in showcasing themselves, meticulously polishing their outward image, and crafting a version of success that appeared superficially appealing. You were engaged in the invisible work, the type that garners no applause, the type that doesn't trend on social media. You weren't desperately seeking immediate attention. You were learning how to bear the weight of responsibility, how to achieve wholeness without the validation of an audience. They were pursuing external accolades. You were pursuing internal alignment. They coveted throngs of followers. You desired profound depth. They were fixated on being seen. You were focused on achieving clarity of self first, because you understood that if you bypassed that essential step, the one that necessitated unlearning, unpacking, and unraveling whatever you subsequently constructed, would be ephemeral. You didn't aspire to be superficially impressive. You aspired to be authentically true. You didn't desire to present a facade of success while feeling internally hollow. You desired to embody purpose, power, and inner peace. That is why now, when individuals encounter you, a distinctly different response is elicited. They don't simply notice your presence. They intuitively feel it. They don't merely admire your accomplishments. They deeply respect what you were required to become to arrive at this juncture, because it is unequivocally clear that you didn't seek shortcuts. You didn't take the path of least resistance. You didn't evade the struggle. You allowed life to sculpt you. You allowed the process to humble you. You allowed pain to impart its invaluable lessons, and that type of transformative journey engenders a presence that cannot be imitated. You weren't adorning yourself for public display. You were cultivating yourself for your ultimate destiny. And now individuals are beginning to recognize that. Some are rendered speechless. Some are shaken to their core. Some are even triggered because your very existence challenges the prevailing culture of superficiality. You achieved inner solidity while they were still engaged in a mere charade. You became genuine in a world that is increasingly addicted to artificial filters, and now that you have stepped forward, it isn't just your time, it's your ordained turn. They won't simply glance in your direction. They will pause and take notice. They will question how they overlooked you, and the underlying answer will invariably remain the same. You weren't concealing yourself. You were undergoing a profound transformation, and now that you have arrived, the incessant noise begins to subside because something profoundly worthwhile has finally made its entrance. Number 10. They believed you had missed your moment, unaware that you were the moment. They believed you had missed your moment. They scrutinized your delay, your periods of silence, your deliberate progress, and assumed that your opportunities had passed. They asserted that you should have voiced your opinions sooner. They claimed that your window of opportunity had closed. They surmised that the spotlight had shifted elsewhere. But what they failed to comprehend is that you were never intended to conform to someone else's arbitrary timeline. You were never designed to arrive precisely on cue. You are the cue itself. You are the fundamental shift that others have been subconsciously awaiting without even fully realizing it. You weren't delayed. You weren't veering off course. You were simply aligned with a distinct rhythm, a divinely ordained one, a sacred one, one that is not impelled by fear or coerced by external pressure. And now that you have unequivocally arrived, everything else is undergoing a process of recalibration. The prevailing energy is shifting. The established dynamics are rearranging themselves because you didn't arrive to merely blend in. You arrived to reset the very tone of the environment. You weren't created to simply match the tempo of the external world. You were created to set it. That is why things intrinsically feel different when you articulate your thoughts now. That is why opportunities are materializing that were once resolutely denied to you. That is why individuals who previously ignored you are now pausing mid-sentence when your name is invoked, because they are beginning to recognize that the defining moment was inherently incomplete without your presence. You don't need to provide explanations for your absence. You don't need to defend your periods of delay. The true power resides in the fact that you present yourself with readiness, not haste, with thorough preparation, not with anxiety, with inner solidity, not with fragmentation. You didn't forfeit the opportunity. You are the opportunity. And that profound truth is resonating deeply, especially with those who assumed that your time had passed. Now the spotlight isn't simply locating you. It is settling upon you not because you vehemently vied for it, but because you embody something that can no longer be disregarded. This isn't about retribution or vindication. It is about divine alignment. This is about your inherent purpose finally intersecting with your authentic presence. You didn't miss your destined moment. The moment was patiently awaiting you, and now that you have arrived, everything finally makes intuitive sense. Number 11, they gave you the wrong script and you still outperformed them. So to wrap it all up, remember this. Your journey with all its twists and turns wasn't a delay, but a divine setup. You weren't late. You were being meticulously prepared for the role only you can play. You are the narrative curveball, the orchestrator, the one whose authenticity shines brighter than any manufactured spotlight. You weren't chasing visibility, you were evolving into something truly worthy of recognition. I hope this message resonates with you, reminds you of your inherent power, and encourages you to step into your ascendance with confidence and grace. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, sharing your own experiences. Ask any questions that came up or just join the conversation. And if this message resonated with you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future insights and inspiration. Let's continue this journey together. Journey together. Journey together. Journey together. Journey together. Welcome, kindred spirits. Never underestimate the profound impact of the individual who held everything together until they chose to release their grip. Here's a truth that often goes unnoticed. Social dynamics research reveals that within every family circle of friends or workplace environment there exists an unspoken linchpin, the person whose very presence sustains the harmony, even if their efforts remain unacknowledged. Here's the stark reality. The instant this anchor departs, the once thriving functional entity can disintegrate with alarming speed. Chosen ones, whether you recognize it or not, you frequently embody that essential anchor. The disconcerting yet somewhat ironic truth is that people seldom grasp this fact until your absence becomes palpable. They operate under the illusion that all is well, that the system functions seamlessly. However, you were the lubricating oil in the machinery, the unseen engineer ensuring smooth operation. Upon your departure, the entire endeavor begins to resemble a discordant symphony. It's a darkly humorous paradox. You dedicate years to preventing chaos from engulfing those around you, and the moment you decide, I am stepping away, a chain reaction of unforeseen consequences unfolds. Friendships fracture, alliances dissolve into bitter rivalries, and those who once proclaimed their self-sufficiency find themselves adrift like children lost in a bustling marketplace. Today we delve into the reasons why your absence transcends a mere void. It generates a vacuum so intense that it draws hidden truths about individuals to the surface. And believe me, some of those truths they desperately wish to remain concealed. First, you functioned as the unsung architect providing structural integrity. They perceived the framework surrounding them as robust, judging solely by its exterior appearance. However, they remained unaware that you were the constant silent force maintaining its stability. You were not the figurehead, the loudest voice, or the most prominent presence. Rather, you were the stabilizer, the one who intervened to prevent crises, the one who preempted problems before they escalated into full-blown disasters. You executed these tasks with such effortless consistency that your efforts were mistaken for mere fortunate happenstance. In reality, the equilibrium they enjoyed was not coincidental. It was meticulously crafted through your unwavering dedication. You detected subtle tensions that others disregarded, bridged divides between individuals who were at odds, and smoothed over imperfections to enable the group to function without confronting its inherent flaws. You performed these actions discreetly, not seeking recognition but simply ensuring cohesion. The truth is, you were the uncompensated architect of their stability, designing the invisible framework of their operations, even if you were not formally in charge. Like any structure, once the architect departs, concealed deficiencies begin to surface. Cracks appear in the walls. Floors become uneven and the foundations weaken. Accusations begin to fly, but the reality is that they never acquired the skills to maintain the edifice without your guidance. When you vanish, the absence extends beyond the physical. It permeates the operational. Suddenly, previously calm discussions devolve into heated arguments. Projects that were once completed efficiently now stagnate. Individuals who formerly collaborated now engage in competition or withdraw entirely. What they termed teamwork or camaraderie was, in fact, your skillful management of the subtle nuances that maintained harmony. And here's the candid truth they resist acknowledging. They underestimated your value because they failed to observe the work you performed. They assumed that cohesion was inherent, not the result of a dedicated individual working tirelessly behind the scenes. That's precisely why your absence creates such a palpable void. They struggle to articulate the specific element that is missing, yet its absence pervades every aspect of their interactions. They then realize that you were not merely a replaceable component of the system. You were the system itself. And now, lacking its architect, the entire structure begins to crumble under its own weight. Second, they failed to recognize your role as the discrete regulator of chaos. You were more than just another member of the group. You were the silent force managing turbulent situations. You possessed the ability to diffuse tensions before they spiraled, redirect negative energy before it poisoned the atmosphere, and subtly steer conversations away from contentious topics. Most individuals were unaware of your interventions, which was precisely the intention. Your skill lay not in dramatically extinguishing fires, but in preventing sparks from igniting in the first place. When you were present, conflict seemed less significant, disagreements were short-lived, and drama never fully consumed the environment. People attributed this to a naturally peaceful setting, but that was not the case. Without you, the truth quickly emerges. Everyone's abrasive qualities become amplified. Minor misunderstandings escalate, and situations that were once resolved amicably spiral out of control. The harmony they believed they possessed was not innate. It was a direct consequence of your unobtrusive interventions. You possessed the ability to perceive people's emotions even before they spoke. You could detect when someone was on the verge of losing their composure, or when pride was about to obstruct resolution. You intervened at precisely the right moment, not to assume control, but to subtly restore equilibrium. Because your actions were subtle, people assumed that things simply worked out organically. However, the reality is that without your influence, things do not resolve themselves. They disintegrate rapidly. Your absence immediately alters the atmosphere. Conversations turn into confrontations. Minor disagreements transform into deep-seated grudges. Individuals who once coexisted peacefully thanks to your presence now struggle to occupy the same space without friction. Your role was not about domination. It was about maintaining equilibrium. And balance is a quality that is only fully appreciated in its absence. The harsh truth is that most individuals are naturally reactive. They lack the skills to manage their emotions, communicate with patience, or compromise without feeling as though they have sacrificed something. You facilitated these abilities for them without their awareness. Now, without the regulator in place, every unhealed wound, every hidden rivalry, and every suppressed ego runs rampant. The chaos you once absorbed now has nowhere to dissipate, resulting in an explosion. Third, the cohesive element was not the group, but you. They believed their unity was strong and their bond unbreakable. However, the truth is that the glue binding them together was not the group itself. It was you. You were the connecting thread, the one who prevented relationships from fraying, who ensured that everyone had a reason to gather at the same table. Without your consistent presence, those invisible threads begin to snap one by one, and the relationships they perceived as strong suddenly feel distant, awkward, or contrived. You were the one who checked in on individuals without expecting reciprocity. You remembered important dates, smoothed over misunderstandings before they escalated into permanent divisions, and created opportunities for connection when others were too preoccupied or prideful to make the effort. The warmth and cohesion they experienced were not generated equally by all. They were fueled by your unwavering commitment. The reason the group appeared functional from an external perspective was that you were constantly patching the cracks. When someone drifted away, you drew them back in. When someone was distressed, you found a way to address it without causing defensiveness. You created an inclusive environment, even when others lacked the capacity to extend that inclusivity themselves. Because you operated discreetly, they assumed it was the natural course of the relationships. Your absence quickly exposes these underlying tensions. Individuals who harbored animosity toward one another now lack a reason to feign congeniality. Those who tolerated each other solely for your benefit no longer feel compelled to maintain the facade. Minor annoyances become justifications for severing contact altogether. The shared experiences that once sustained the bond become increasingly rare. What they believed to be mutual loyalty proves to be loyalty directed solely toward you. Without you, they realize that they lack a significant basis for their connection. It's not that you were forcing connections. You were maintaining them, and when the maintainer departs, neglect sets in. This is the most painful realization. They never recognized your importance to the group's survival until its disintegration commenced. Only then do they perceive that the glue was not invisible. It was you, and you are now gone. Fourth, you rendered the dysfunction tolerable. They were already accustomed to chaos, tension, and unspoken issues long before your arrival, but you somehow made it bearable. You did not eliminate the problems, nor did you create an idyllic state. But you absorbed the burden in a way that enabled others to persevere without feeling completely overwhelmed. You mediated disputes, absorbed frustrations, and translated emotional complexities into something they could manage. Your presence transformed what could have been a constant storm into a manageable drizzle. People did not understand the extent to which their comfort depended on your efforts, because you never made it obvious. You remained calm when tempers flared, mediated between conflicting personalities, and identified solutions that others lacked the patience or insight to discover. Your emotional labor was silent but essential. Without it, the dysfunction does not dissipate. It becomes fully visible, raw, and impossible to ignore. When you step away, the weight you carried does not vanish. Instead, it falls squarely upon those who relied on you unknowingly. Suddenly, minor irritations escalate into major conflicts. Old grudges that you managed to keep dormant erupt. tasks that appeared simple become insurmountable because no one else acquired the skills to manage the environment as you did. The equilibrium you established disappears overnight, leaving people struggling to stay afloat in waters they thought were calm. The irony is that many never expressed gratitude or acknowledged your role. They took your labor for granted, assuming that it was natural for the chaos to be so manageable. Now, in your absence, they realized that nothing was truly natural. It was you sustaining the balance. This realization is not merely uncomfortable, it is alarming. The very individuals who thrived because of your unobtrusive efforts are now facing the dysfunction they have evaded for years, and they are utterly unprepared. You transformed the unbearable into the tolerable. You provided people with the space to function in an environment that would have otherwise broken them. Your departure provides a stark, undeniable lesson. The comfort they relied on was never their own. It belonged to you. Its loss delivers a reality check, forcing them to confront the truths they had been avoiding. Fifth, your absence reveals the delicate egos you shielded. For years, you diligently protected others from themselves. You intervened before they faltered, softened truths they were not prepared to confront, and delivered constructive criticism that facilitated growth without causing them to feel exposed. You did not seek accolades. You acted out of the understanding that many individuals struggle to navigate reality without a steadying presence. You became the buffer between the harshness of life and the fragile egos surrounding you. Your departure removes that crucial filter. Suddenly, every comment, every action, every glance feels amplified, distorted, and intensely personal. Actions that were once overlooked are now perceived as criticism, betrayal, or even aggression. Individuals who relied on your diplomatic skills to navigate their own insecurities are now left vulnerable and defenseless. Without your intervention, their self-perception is exposed and their reactions become unpredictable, defensive, and even hostile. It is astonishing to consider the amount of emotional labor you invested without recognition. You absorbed their vulnerabilities, translated reality into a palatable form, and managed tensions to prevent relationships from collapsing. Your absence does not merely remove support, it exposes previously invisible flaws. The delicate egos you protected begin to crumble under the weight of a reality they cannot process independently. Arguments ignite, resentment festers, and minor disagreements escalate into full-blown conflicts. Ironically, most individuals never acknowledged your pivotal role in their emotional well-being. They took your presence for granted, assuming the tranquility surrounding them was inherent and permanent. Your departure reveals the undeniable truth: you were the stabilizer, the translator, the one who prevented ego-driven chaos. Without you, the facade crumbles, forcing everyone to confront themselves without the softening lens you provided. Your absence serves as the ultimate revelation. It is the moment when individuals finally acknowledge not only their own weaknesses, but also the extent of their reliance on you to navigate them. The ensuing chaos is not accidental. It is a direct consequence of the disruption of the balance you maintained. They believed they were strong enough to stand alone, but the reality is that you were the silent guardian sustaining their stability. Sixth, you were the concealed energy source from which they drew. You possessed an inner strength that others leaned on, often unconsciously. It extended beyond your physical presence. It manifested in your unwavering determination during difficult times, your ability to find reasons to persevere when others were ready to concede defeat. Your optimism was not feigned. It was forged through hardship. Your persistence stemmed from depths that most people never needed to explore. Without fanfare, you became the battery that powered those around you. They constantly tapped into your energy. Your motivation inspired them to believe they could continue. Your joy, even when you had every reason to be jaded, reminded them that there was still worth in participating. Your vision provided a sense of direction when they felt lost. Because you made it appear effortless, they assumed that the fuel was inexhaustible and readily available. However, you were never intended to be their permanent power source. You were generating your own light amidst your own battles, and others were drawing from it. Unfortunately, they never learned to cultivate their own internal energy. They became accustomed to relying on you without acknowledging their dependence. Your departure is akin to shutting down the central generator. Suddenly, their motivation falters, their outlook darkens, and even minor challenges seem insurmountable. They miss more than just your presence. They yearn for the spark you ignited, the unwavering belief that things could improve. Without it, they are forced to confront the truth. Their energy was never self-generated, it was borrowed from you. The silence that follows your absence extends beyond the emotional realm. It affects the mental and spiritual. They feel sluggish, burdened, and uncertain. It's not that they have lost their own power. It's that they never possessed much to begin with, and now there is nothing left to draw from. This is why your departure affects them so profoundly. You were more than just a pleasant companion. You were the driving force that sustained them, the hidden source that made life appear brighter. Now the lights are out and they lack the knowledge to restore them. Seventh, the intricate web you maintained collapses in the absence of its weaver. Every individual, every relationship, every collaborative effort within that group was interconnected through you, consciously or unconsciously. You were the bridge between individuals who would not naturally interact, the mediator between conflicting personalities, and the central point where disparate threads converged. Others may have perceived themselves as connected, but in reality those connections existed largely because of you. You were the spider at the heart of the web, silently holding the intricate structure together. Your presence facilitated seamless interactions. You streamlined communication, smoothed over missteps, and fostered opportunities for collaboration that would not have materialized otherwise. You identified gaps, tensions, and misunderstandings, resolving them before others even recognized the problems. People supported one another in ways that seemed natural, but your efforts were the binding force that created that impression. The problem is most individuals never recognize the architecture underpinning the harmony. They assume the relationships and collaborations are self-sustaining, when in reality they are fragile threads anchored entirely by you. Your departure causes those threads to snap. The group begins to realize that their connections were not as robust as they believed. Old conflicts resurface, minor disagreements escalate, and partnerships that seemed solid begin to dissolve. The absence of the spider you reveals a truth. The network never belonged to them, it was always centered around you. Without your stabilizing presence, everything begins to unravel. People scramble to maintain cohesion, but they fumble blindly because the structure was never designed to function without the central hub. The irony is profound. The individuals who exuded confidence and control now seem lost, frustrated, and confused, unable to comprehend why the harmony they depended on has vanished. They never appreciated the web while it was intact because they never recognized its intricacy, the effort required to maintain it, and the extent to which they relied on your skills to navigate it. Your departure is not just noticed, its effects are pervasive. Every failed conversation, every broken connection, every unsuccessful collaboration can be traced back to the individual they underestimated you. Eighth, the tranquility they experienced was borrowed from you. Individuals assume that everything felt calm and balanced, because that's simply the natural state of affairs. They never understood that the tranquility they enjoyed was entirely borrowed from you. You were the one who absorbed the tension that no one else wanted to confront, carried the unspoken burdens that everyone silently ignored, and created a sense of security that made the environment feel manageable. Your mere presence served as a shield against conflict, stress, and uncertainty. You sought no recognition, and you never publicized your efforts, which led them to believe that the peace was inherent rather than maintained. You managed the drama, the grudges, and the hidden anxieties that threatened to erupt at any moment, all while projecting a steady energy that everyone mistook for normalcy. The calm they perceived was not genuine. It was carefully sustained by your unwavering dedication, patience, and understanding. Your departure shatters the illusion immediately. The atmosphere shifts imperceptibly at first, but soon becoming undeniable. Conversations that once felt relaxed begin to carry an undercurrent of tension. Minor irritations that were previously overlooked ignite into arguments. Individuals who seemed secure and content suddenly feel unsettled. They discover often too late that the equilibrium they depended on was not a shared creation. It was solely your responsibility. The irony is biting. The same individuals who believed the calm was automatic are now forced to confront the fact that without you, the environment is unstable. They were not building their own foundations, they were relying entirely on yours. Now, with you gone, they must face not only the chaos but also their inability to manage it. Your presence served as the hidden thermostat, regulating the emotional temperature and keeping things tolerable. Without it, everything feels harsher, colder, and more volatile. People scramble, relationships suffer, and the carefully balanced atmosphere you created collapses under its own weight. They finally see what they have been missing all along. The tranquility they took for granted was never their own to claim. Ninth, your departure forces everyone to confront their own weight. Your departure disrupts the balance, compelling everyone to shoulder burdens they've long avoided. For years, they delegated pressure decisions and unpleasant tasks to you, relying on your strength as a perpetual safety net. Now, without your support, they grapple with their own weight, a burden they've never learned to manage. Tasks once deemed simple become overwhelming. Long-avoided decisions now demand immediate attention. The emotional labor guidance and structure you provided vanish, exposing their unpreparedness. Cracks form as projects stall, relationships strain, and frustration mounts. They confront their character and ability deficiencies. For years, you transformed the impossible into the manageable, but your absence unveils their lack of resilience, discipline, and foresight. So, kindred spirits, let's recap. Remember that quiet strength you possess, that often unseen influence you wield. It's about recognizing the profound impact you have on the spaces and relationships you inhabit, especially when you decide to step back. You may not always get the acknowledgement you deserve, but your absence truly speaks volumes about the stability, harmony, and even the hidden energy you brought to the table. It's a reminder that your well-being matters, and sometimes releasing that grip is the most powerful thing you can do. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like the linchpin? Or perhaps you've witnessed this dynamic play out in your own life? Leave a comment below, ask a question, or just share your experiences. Let's get the conversation going. And if this resonated with you, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future explorations of human connection, hidden dynamics, and the power within you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here.